Picture this. You're walking through what's supposed to be the most beautiful palace in the world. Golden chandeliers hang overhead, mirrors reflect infinite luxury, and you're surrounded by silk-clad nobles dripping in diamonds. But then it hits you, a wave of stench so putrid, so overwhelming, that you immediately cover your nose and fight back the urge to vomit. Welcome to Versailles, where up to 10,000 people lived and worked daily with virtually no toilets. You thought your college dorm bathroom was bad? Think again. This is the story of how Europe's most magnificent palace became a literal cesspool where princes peed in corners, princesses pooped in hallways, and human waste created golden puddles in the very corridors where kings once walked. Buckle up, because we're about to dive into the most disgusting royal scandal that your history teacher definitely didn't tell you about. Let's start with the numbers, because they're absolutely mind-blowing. When Louis XIV moved his entire court to Versailles in 1682, he created what historians now call a demographic disaster. On any given day, between 3,000 to 10,000 people packed into this palace. We're talking about nobles, servants, ministers, guards, kitchen staff, and countless hangers-on, all crammed into one building. Now here's the kicker. Until 1768, that's nearly 100 years later, only 3 people in the entire palace had actual flush toilets: the king, queen, and dauphin. 3 toilets for 10,000 people. Let that sink in. To put this in perspective, imagine trying to use the bathroom at a massive concert venue, but there are only 3 toilets for the entire crowd. Except these people weren't leaving after a few hours. They lived there. The math is simple and horrifying. Thousands of human beings producing waste daily with essentially nowhere proper to put it. Enter Princess d'Harcourt, the most infamous bathroom offender in royal history. According to the detailed memoirs of the Duc de Saint-Simon, who lived at Versailles and witnessed this horror firsthand, the princess had a disgusting habit that shocked even the jaded French court. Saint-Simon wrote that Princess d'Harcourt would literally just cut loose in the hallway whenever nature called. But here's where it gets truly bizarre. She believed her blood was so pure that she could relieve herself anywhere she pleased, like a horse. She thought her royal blood was so superior that her waste was somehow different from everyone else's. The poor servants had to follow her around with cleaning supplies, constantly mopping up after her public urination sessions. Saint-Simon, clearly disgusted, noted that she didn't think twice about urinating in public, and that she inspired other courtiers to adopt similarly revolting habits. But Princess d'Harcourt wasn't alone. In 1702, Princess Elizabeth Charlotte, a German-born royal who married into the French court, wrote in absolute horror about what she witnessed. "The people stationed in the galleries in front of our rooms piss in all the corners. It is impossible to leave one's apartment without seeing someone peeing." Life at Versailles was a 24/7 nightmare of human waste and stench. With virtually no proper toilets and thousands of people answering nature's call, the palace became what one historian called the filthiest palace in the world. Let's break down exactly how disgusting things got. Since there was no proper plumbing, servants collected waste in chamber pots and had 2 options: carry them to distant cesspools or simply dump them out the windows. Guess which option they usually chose? Passers-by had to move with caution to avoid being hit by flying human waste. Even Marie Antoinette herself was reportedly hit by waste thrown from a window as she walked through a courtyard. The few public toilets that existed were described as overflowing nightmares. Due to the sheer number of people on the estate and woefully inadequate supply of facilities, these latrines were under tremendous strain. They often overflowed, and sewage seeped through the walls and floors into neighboring rooms. Imagine trying to sleep in your luxurious palace apartment while sewage literally seeps through your walls. With nowhere else to go, many courtiers answered nature's call, whenever and wherever it was most convenient. The beautiful corridors and courtyards of Versailles, the same ones tourists admire today, were regularly used as open-air bathrooms, wrote detailed accounts of the horrific stench. One eyewitness described the scene in terms that would make you never want to visit. The unpleasant odors in the park, gardens, even the chateau make one's gorge rise. The communicating passages, courtyards, buildings in the wings, corridors are full of urine and feces. But it gets worse. The witness continued. A pork butcher actually sticks and roasts his pigs at the bottom of the minister's wing every morning. The Avenue Saint-Cloud is covered with stagnant water and dead cats. Yes, you read that correctly. Dead cats floating in stagnant water were part of the daily scenery at the world's most luxurious palace. Another account describes the scene as a hellish, miasmic concoction of sweat and human excrement and urine that would have followed you around. Visitors noted that it would have taken a long time to get used to the overwhelming stench. You might think the king himself would set a better example, but Louis XIV was just as disgusting as his subjects, maybe worse. Historians believe that the Sun King had only 2 baths over the course of his entire life. 2 baths in 77 years of living. The first bath was prescribed by doctors in 1665 when Louis was 27 to help him recover from convulsions. But even then, the presiding physician interrupted the process when Louis seemed not to hold up well under the strain. So he didn't even complete that bath properly. Instead of bathing, Louis would wipe himself down with a towel, scrub his body with perfume and alcohol, and wash his hands every morning. He changed shirts multiple times per day, a move that signaled both money and status, but never actually cleaned his body. The smell must have been absolutely revolting. One courtier noted that anyone approaching the king did well not to carry orange flowers because Louis's own stench was so strong it would compete with their fragrance. Faced with the overwhelming stench, courtiers tried to combat it with massive amounts of perfume. As one historian put it, to use excessive amounts of perfume was to protect oneself and to purify the surrounding air. But this solution only made things infinitely worse. Instead of masking the smell, the perfume added yet another fragrance to the already unbearable stench. Imagine the most expensive French perfumes mixed with human feces, rotting cat corpses, and body odor. The result was a nauseating cocktail that assaulted visitors' senses from multiple directions. Louis XIV himself was obsessed with perfume, commissioning his perfumer to create a new scent for each day of the week. Throughout the palace, bowls were filled with flower petals to sweeten the air. Furniture was sprayed with perfume. Even visitors were sprayed with perfume on entering the palace, in what was probably a defensive move. The sanitation problems didn't stop at bathrooms. They contaminated the food supply too. The plumbing problems made life difficult for the palace's cooks. On at least one documented occasion, sewage seeped into Marie Antoinette's private kitchens and poisoned everything. Think about that. The future Queen of France was eating food prepared in kitchens contaminated with human waste. And if it happened to her private kitchens, Imagine what was happening in the main palace kitchens, serving thousands of people daily. The lack of proper food sanitation meant that intestinal parasites lived within courtiers at Versailles. Even Louis XIV himself wasn't spared. He had several bouts of tapeworm. During one particularly memorable episode, Louis is said to have relieved himself of a worm that was nearly 6 inches long. Here's the thing. Versailles was never meant to house thousands of people. It started as a simple hunting lodge for Louis XIII. When Louis XIV decided to expand it into the center of French government, he created a logistical nightmare. The location was fundamentally unsuitable for a major palace. Built on shifting sand and marsh, it wasn't near flowing water that could whisk away waste. Unlike other royal residences that could manage waste through natural water flow, Versailles was essentially a swamp with no natural waste management system. Making matters exponentially worse was Louis XIV's decision to stay put at Versailles rather than circulating between multiple palaces as kings had previously done. This put an impossible housekeeping burden on the army of servants who simply couldn't keep up with the mountains of filth and waste that courtiers produced. You want to know how bad things got? Louis XIV finally had to issue official orders for servants to clean up the waste, but only weekly, once a week. Imagine 7 days' worth of accumulated human and animal waste from thousands of people just sitting there, fermenting in the French heat. Even this minimal cleaning schedule was clearly inadequate. By the 1760s, decades after these cleaning orders, people were still finding others using the corridors as toilets. In 1785, one particular privy got so bad that 7 people with rooms nearby filed a formal complaint saying that the smell penetrates the lodgings and infects furnishing, clothes, and linen, and that it attracted certain riffraff who use it as a meeting place. Here's where this story takes a darker turn. The disgusting conditions at Versailles weren't just gross, they became a symbol of royal excess and disconnect from reality. While ordinary French people struggled with basic sanitation in their daily lives, the aristocracy literally lived in golden filth, pretending their waste didn't stink. The contrast was staggering. Louis XIV could commission new perfumes for each day of the week and build halls lined with mirrors, but couldn't be bothered to install proper toilets for the thousands of people living in his palace. This kind of spectacular mismanagement and callous indifference to basic human needs became part of the revolutionary narrative that would eventually literally cost French royalty their heads. So why isn't this disgusting reality taught in history class? Simple. It doesn't fit the romantic narrative of royal splendor that tourism industries want to promote. Today, millions of people visit Versailles annually, admiring the restored beauty while having no idea they're walking through corridors that were once ankle-deep in human waste. Modern Versailles smells like furniture polish and tourist crowds, not the hellish miasmic concoction of feces and perfume that defined the royal experience. The palatial bathrooms you see today, most of them were installed centuries later. The beautiful gardens, they used to be littered with dead cats and stagnant pools of wastewater. Museums and tour guides prefer to focus on artistic achievements and political intrigue rather than the biological reality of what it meant to cram 10,000 people into a building with essentially no plumbing. But understanding this disgusting truth is crucial to understanding why the French Revolution happened and why ordinary people were so eager to literally tear down this system of royal privilege. The next time someone talks about the good old days or romanticizes royal life, remember this: Europe's most powerful king lived in conditions that would be condemned by modern health inspectors. Louis XIV could command armies, build magnificent palaces, and rule absolutely over millions of people, but he couldn't figure out how to install proper toilets. Versailles represents the ultimate failure of absolute power, when you're so disconnected from reality that you think perfume can solve the problem of human waste accumulation, when you're so obsessed with ceremony and status that you'd rather have nobles pee in corners than admit your palace planning was fundamentally flawed. The beautiful Versailles you can visit today is essentially historical fiction, a sanitized, perfumed version of what was actually a magnificent cesspool. The real Versailles was a place where princesses pooped in hallways, dead cats rotted in courtyards, and the Sun King himself stank so badly that courtiers had to avoid wearing certain flowers in his presence. So the next time you're complaining about a dirty public restroom, just remember, you're still living better than French royalty did in their golden age. At least your toilet flushes.